11:49 is the time. You're listening to, well, it's like the man said, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A few more of those scandals, gaffes, call them what you will. He managed to offend pretty much the whole of Myanmar when he went there and started reciting Rudyard Kipling's The Road to Mandalay, very much a sort of colonial era poem, that post-colonial Myanmar, previously Burma, of course. I mean, just astonishingly tin-eared to do that. The account of the diplomat who had to sort of steer him away from it was particularly interesting, and he did it at a revered location as well, the Shwedagon Pagoda in Yangon. And then, of course, there was the time in a Sikh temple when he started talking about how whiskey exports to India would rocket in the event of Brexit. This is when he was Foreign Secretary, apparently not knowing in a Sikh temple that alcohol is forbidden in the Sikh faith. He managed to insult the entire city of Liverpool. Remember what I told you? Listen to this from the point of view of somebody reading you a list of disgusting behaviour, but listen to it with the thought in your mind that this appeals to Boris Johnson supporters. It doesn't repel them, as it does me or you, but neither does it render them ambivalent. This isn't the sort of, these aren't scales where they go, oh dear, yeah, all that stuff James is talking about is pretty bad, but on the other hand, here's some good stuff. This is the good stuff. This is the stuff they like. Oh, excellent. He said some awful things about Muslim women. And didn't they measure a rise in attacks on Muslim women after he did that? Yeah, they'd love that too, you see. Great, yeah, that's good. What's wrong with that? It's good. We should be attacking more Muslim women. And the stuff about smiling Piccaninnies, base racism. Yeah, good. I love base racism. Misogyny. Insulting the entire city of Liverpool. Great, yeah, I hate Scousers. This is not stuff that gets put in scales and outweighed by the good stuff Boris Johnson stands for, the good stuff Boris Johnson does. This is the good stuff for his supporters. And they're not knuckle-dragging Neanderthals or sort of little Tommy Ten Names fans. They went to schools like his, a lot of them. They are middle-class people. They're upper-middle-class people. They run through all the classes. Bigotries, prejudices, racism, not confined to any set. Arguably, throughout the last century, the working class has been the least racist in this country. But, of course, the great success of the last few years, post-Farage, is an attempt to equate working-class sensibilities with racism. And that has been a successful mission. But the people lapping up this stuff from Boris Johnson are just as likely to be Conservative Party members. In fact, more likely to be Conservative Party members than they are to self-identify as working class, whatever that means these days. So he insulted the entire city of Liverpool. This in the context of Hillsborough, of course. Michael Howard, his then party leader, forced him to apologise after he accused the citizens of wallowing in victim status. He then went on to insult the entire country of Papua New Guinea, making jokes about their orgies of cannibalism. Oh, I love that. Yeah, love that. Because you should, I mean, it's great, isn't it, the way he dehumanises foreigners in distant islands. I love it. He said Africa needs its old colonial powers to come back. This is 20 years ago, that we should cancel the guilt trip about... he was ahead of his time, wasn't he? That's pretty much the beginning of anti-woke. Oh, stop banging on about slavery all the time and be grateful for all the good that we did in the empire. And in fact, stop talking about the empire at all unless you're going to focus on the positives. 250 grand a year was, of course, chicken feed, the money he got as a journalist. He then made about 700 grand in earnings alongside his job as an MP after quitting as Foreign Secretary. I just suggest to you it means that his eye wasn't really on the ball of Uxbridge constituents, but I could, of course, be wrong. He compared the EU to Adolf Hitler, saying they both wanted a united Europe, which, yeah, again, is going to play brilliantly with really stupid Brexit supporters who don't understand anything but know just how angry they are and hate Germans. Spoke to someone earlier this week, didn't we, whose neighbour voted Brexit because she just hates Germans. 20 grand flight to avoid scrutiny on Heathrow Airport. That's after he promised to lie down in front of the bulldozers if they went ahead with the new runway. And instead he spent £20,000 of our money on a sort of made-up trip to Kabul so that he didn't even have to vote on... For the opposite of what he'd promised to oppose. You've got all the ethics probes that were launched into him in September 2019 after the Sunday Times revealed his friendship with Jennifer Arcuri, another one of his mistresses who he claimed had been giving him technology lessons when in fact she'd been schooling him in Ugandan relations, as Private Eye used to call it. He unlawfully shut down Parliament, of course, after sending Jacob Rees-Mogg Balmoral to mislead the Queen. That was the judgment of the Supreme Court, the highest court in the UK, which, of course, Brexit Brexiters really revere and respect because they hate all those foreign judges getting involved. But when the highest court in the UK concluded that the Prime Minister had acted unlawfully, he faced demands to resign, and all his supporters suddenly sided with him instead of with those good old-fashioned British judges that hadn't been in any way influenced by Brussels. Tens of thousands of people died, of course, in the early months of COVID, many of them probably unnecessarily. Tens of thousands of people died who didn't need to die, said Dominic Cummings, his key advisor, revealing that the Prime Minister was constantly reluctant to impose any measures that would have reduced that death toll, and that he frequently ignored scientific advice and refused to take COVID seriously. But he got all the big calls right, remember? That's what the people shilling for him today would have you believe. He claimed to have got Brexit done. Our caller in Belfast reminds us it ain't done. And in fact, the treaty that they signed, negotiated by the ludicrous Lord Frost, they were trying to disown before the ink was even dry. He also, of course, and I don't know if this is on the list, I'll cross it off if we come to it later, lied about the necessity of a border in the Irish Sea. Priti Patel, his Home Secretary, was found to be an egregious bully. The PM's own advisor on ministerial standards conducted an independent report and concluded that the ministerial code had been broken. Johnson didn't do anything. Alex Allen, the advisor, resigned. He ranted about bodies piling high and 80-year-olds getting COVID, according to Cummings. Again, lucrative COVID contacts went to Tory allies without anything being put out to honest tender. Dominic Cummings lied through his teeth about going to Barnard Castle, but Boris Johnson let him keep his job. He broke his own manifesto promise over national insurance and pensions. He repeatedly tried to undermine and contradict Marcus Rashford over free school meals before undertaking a complete U-turn. He blew another £1 million on another non-existent bridge, this one to Northern Ireland, which was supposed to overcome the problems brought in by the Brexit that he hasn't got done. He tried to tear up the ethics rules to save Owen Paterson, of course, block a 30-day suspension after Paterson was found to have breached the rules. They tried to tear up the rule book, something that Jacob Rees-Mogg was the architect of. He lied to Parliament over Downing Street parties. He's still under investigation for that, and he became the first Prime Minister to commit a criminal offence in office. And that's just off the top of my head. It's not really. I obviously had a list in front of me, but I bet you're already thinking of things that didn't make the list. Don't at me, though, because I did half of the list or 15 of the list earlier. So don't at me with the ones that you don't think I included, because I probably did, but you weren't listening at that point, and now you are.